everyone, to the Bank Customer Experience Podcast. My name is Bradley Cooper. I'm the editor of ATM Marketplace and the moderator for today's discussion. Excuse me. And today we are joined by a very interesting gentleman, Felix Nater of Nater Associates. It's really great to have you on,
It's a
Felix.
pleasure to be here, Brad.
Excellent. And today we're talking about, so your expertise is really in security and safety. So we really want to dive into some of the security and safety issues within the bank branch and maybe a little bit, of retail and businesses in general. So, security, that's a topic, it's evergreen, it's constantly discussed, it's constantly top of
Yeah,
mind, but very seldom successfully
yeah,
executed. Where do you see banks struggling in terms of like maybe branch security, first of
yeah,
all?
yeah. Banks, like retail, are in the customer service side of the community or the environment, and employees in those environments like to be of service to their customers. Well, that service
Exactly.
comes in conflict with what we consider personal responsibilities in minimizing risk. When it
Hmm.
comes to security training, Brad, if you don't have the right person who understands the principles of training, then you deliver information at your level and fail to understand that you may have created communication impediments in the hearts and minds of people who are not security or former law enforcement
Hmm.
or military personnel. So you have to create
Sure.
a mutually training environment where people feel comfortable in asking questions. These are adults, and adults don't want to be
Hmm.
spoon fed. They want to be part of that process. So I find that learning is a big factor, and the environment is certainly one that is critically insensitive when an armed robber comes in to their safety. They're more concerned with getting in and getting out.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, can you talk a little bit about, on a more positive note, what are some correct things they are doing with security?
Oh, I tell you what, I take my hat off to the banking industry, both the non-security managers and the security managers. I think they recognize that the training piece, when designed properly and delivered properly, gets to the hearts and minds of these employees who really, really are going to be traumatized, whether directly
Sure.
impacted by the robber or ancillary association because of proximity. And so the making sure that we convey employee responsibilities clearly as possible is something that they have done quite well over the years. It's a high demand
Hmm.
to expect an employee having a gun pointed at them to remember all the things in that emotionally charged moment that they're supposed to do without antagonizing the bad guy who jumps over the counter and assaults them. So I think the training environment is doing well. And of course, from my point of view, it can always improve, but it's doing well.
Right, exactly. Can you talk a little bit about how can banks really give their employees that confidence to deal with that moment? Because these are very stressful moments, as you mentioned. A lot of these people probably aren't coming from a security
Yes.
background or a former military or something like
Yes,
that.
yes. The trainer, the person delivering the content has to be empathetic. They have to present the contents
Hmm.
from their point of view. And if I were in that environment, or the way I handle my current situation is I educate them on what is already being done to bolster their sense of trust and confidence in management's ability to provide for their safety and security. So by that I mean is I explain to them that there's physical security measures in place. How do I get rid of that? There are physical security measures in place. There are things that
Hmm.
have been designed to mitigate their risk. There is everything management is doing behind the scenes to allay concerns, to include tips that employees can take during the non-heightened situations to just empower them.
Sure, sure. Yeah, 'cause sometimes it might be situations where just a customer is upset,
Yeah.
and that's something to deal with. Could become a security risk. So, I want to talk a little bit
Brad,
about
to that
maybe the
point, to
ATMs.
that point,
Oh, go ahead.
something that is underemphasized that's critically important in risk mitigation is communication. When a customer is
Hmm.
upset, and I go into this in my workplace violence prevention 101, the importance of communication, and there are four small modules that I address, is knowing the art of communication can diffuse situations. My wife, if you were
Hmm.
here, would say Felix is always practicing on me. It's how to get into an argument that you know you're going to lose while deriving your satisfaction without annoying the other person. is what I call the art of communication. Is how do you make an angry customer a happy customer by your presentation, by your communication style.
Right. Yeah. I really love that point. So I want to talk a little bit maybe about ATMs. So theft at the ATM, both of people stealing it and people getting robbed at the ATM, that's up. It's a pretty
Yeah.
common problem. Can you offer a little insight
Yes.
into maybe what some banks can do to help maybe prevent those robberies or make their customers feel more at ease?
Yes. It's a victim rich opportunity for the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't properly
Yes.
light the environment up, that's going to create an opportunity for that person to use it as an easy crime. So I recommend that the ATM areas owned by banks should be well lit around the
Mm-hmm.
area, behind the area, in any way possible to discourage the opportunistic criminal. On the other hand, I also promote that the ATM users protect themselves. Don't be an easy mark.
Right.
Don't be an easy victim. Be conscious of your surroundings. If someone is at the ATM machine already, remain in your car. And as you
Mm-hmm.
exit your car, maintain visual surveillance, scanning the area as you walk up to the ATM, and don't be oblivious to your surroundings. I like to stand 90
Mm-hmm.
degrees. I'm in an angle so I can see periphery what's behind me and coming at me
Sure.
while I'm watching the screen, and I'm constantly looking around me in case I see someone advancing. So be cognizant of your surroundings and be responsible for your
Mm-hmm.
personal safety. But in terms of what the bank is doing, I think just lighting up the unit and making it positioning it in a place where it's highly trafficked as opposed to ideally convenient for customers. Highly trafficked as opposed convenience for customers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And like, I like to keep eye on if there are any cars behind me, or do they look like they're in the bank branch line, or they look like they're approaching fast, or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah, I think those are all really great points. So I want to turn a little bit to talk about employee safety and security. So you've spoken in that we've actually spoke back in
Yes.
September
Yes.
just about some employee safety concerns. We spoke at the Bank Customer Experience Summit. So what are some top ways that employees can buy into best security practices? Because a lot of times, they might not understand the reason for these
Yes.
practices, or there might be some negligence here and there. Maybe they leave a door
Right.
open or they let someone in or something like that. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit
Yes.
about
Yes.
that?
What oftentimes isn't conveyed is failure on the part of the employee to report an observation, to connect with a situation that is an at risk condition, and sharing that information exposes others to harm, others to risk.
Hmm.
So I think it's incumbent upon an employee that see something, say something, so to speak. Because if you don't, if there is an eventual event, for example, if you arrive early and you're part of opening and closing, and you're waiting for your co-opener to arrive, and you're not remembering to don't shut your engine off of your vehicle while you're waiting. Why, Felix? Because your door's unlocked when you shut the engine off.
Right.
So keep the engine running and don't pull nose into a parking condition. Uh, Back into it so you can easily escape a threat coming at you. Stay in that vehicle. Be cognizant of why you're there and why you're waiting. And as the other party pulls in, be cognizant of people that might be tailing that person to the bank. They do
Mm,
casing, and casing involves surveillance of employee behaviors. So I think the important part to the question is that awareness and how that awareness connects with personal safety as well as the safety and risk mitigation of others. And one more point to that. I think that
mhm.
well trained employees can take that workplace training and apply it to public space. You could
Right.
mitigate risk by just applying some of those safety conditions that you learn at work in public space.
Right. Do you mind sharing like maybe a positive example of where you've seen that really work? You don't have to name names, but can you think of any examples
Where it works? Sure, sure.
where you've seen it really work? Those
Yes,
techniques really work well.
absolutely. And that's an appropriate question, Brad. So you take active shooter
Hmm.
training, if properly delivered by someone from the corporate security environment with the kind of experience that I bring, can have multiple benefits away from the workplace. You're in a movie theater. You'll know what to do in a movie theater. When you enter a movie theater
Right.
and you decide I want to go sit as far up as I can, make sure you're sitting next to
Hmm.
an exit door, right? If you're in a retail store
Hmm.
in a mall and you hear shots. Take advantage of every piece of opportunity to find a hiding place. My children, when I asked my
Right.
children when they were younger, where would you hide? And they said, in the clothing rack, right? S- Um, if you're in the mall and you hear shots fired, don't do what the average frightened person does, run with the crowd. I say run left or run
Hmm.
right, because you're going to find another place
Right.
from which to hide, or you may find an exit that will allow you to escape being trampled to death or trampled to injury. So active shooter training,
Right.
when correlated to public environments, can be of extreme value, particularly if someone is shooting at you from above. You need to hide behind something that's going to obstruct the trajectory of the round, and usually it's behind an engine block of a
Sure.
vehicle, right? A tree, a stone wall, or the corner of a building,
Hmm.
something that would stop the bullet from hitting you. So there's a lot of applications that, when conveyed in a way where it has transitional value outside the workplace, employees feel good about that
Right.
information.
Yeah, and that leads really well into my next question. So, what are some best practices for businesses in general to help employees really feel safe? Because it's really about, how can they make them feel like the business cares about their safety and how they can provide them practical tools?
Delivering, designing a training program that is shared with them in advance, so they get an opportunity to consume the content, a one pager that consumes the
Hmm.
content. So in their frame of mind, they can have questions prepared in their from their safety and security concerns, that they can then pose as questions to the trainer.
Hmm.
Um, Creating an environment where the employees' questions are answered, feeling as though the questions that you answered is in fact being answered, and answered properly. And don't be tied up with completing all of the curriculum content until you create the environment where people are feeling satisfied about being there. Oftentimes, Rad, the employees don't like to go to security training because it's a regurgitation of last year's content. So freshening
Right.
it up by introducing an incident. The incident that comes to mind, and I don't
Hmm.
remember the exact name of the bank, but in South Carolina, I think Greer, Carolina, South Carolina, about 10 years ago, that was a brutal event where three employees were killed by the bank robbers. Um,
Mm.
from that
Right.
situation, without focusing in on the deaths, you could talk about what could have been done differently, to mitigate
Sure.
their risk. So I like to talk about items that are in the media as part of my training situations and scenarios, so that employees can connect.
Sure. And I really want to lean in real quick. It's the last thing. We talk a lot about communication and how communication is so important. What of your experiences have been ways that communication has broken down through this process of helping train employees in safety and security?
When you are not someone that comes from the law enforcement community or the military community, where training of this nature becomes second nature, and you deliver
Sure.
training once a year that involves personal security of the magnitude that we're discussing, that involves personal safety, it is very difficult for someone who is more concerned about breadwinning, doing their responsibilities, to take into consideration the seriousness of the exposure that they receive once a year. I say, if you're
Hmm.
going to deliver training once a year, reinforce it with semi-annual training opportunities. Put it in your intranet. Make it available so that there's e-learning reinforcement that can take place, so that the employees who doubt
Sure.
themselves or may have fallen asleep at the particular point the question was being answered can go back to the intranet or e-learning system and reinforce their questions.
Right. All excellent points. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Felix, before we sign off for today?
Yes, if you are an employee receiving this kind of training or any other kind of training relative to security, it is important for you not to leave that environment unsatisfied. It is important for you
Hmm.
to have your questions answered, and it is important for you to share with management the concerns from your experience and from your environmental exposure. What bother you? What are things that they need to do that they're not uh, doing or aware of? And that only comes from an employee's willingness to want to share what they know without a fear of recrimination. So I think communication in
Yeah.
that regard is a two-way street. We convey, but they have to also be part of the sharing of their concerns so that we can improve the program for the next opportunity.
Yes, all really great points. I want to thank you so much, Felix, for
Pleasure.
joining us today and sharing all that great
Thanks for
information.
having me, Brad.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.